So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our second episode, I guess, of this season of AMAASE, Ask Me Anything About Social Enterprise. This is your opportunity to ask those burning social enterprise questions. My name is Christine Spottiswoode. I normally fill my days as the project lead for ABC, and today I'm honored to be standing in again as temporary host for Alia, and will yet again do my best to fill her shoes. I'd like to start by acknowledging that I am joining you today from my home in Devon, Alberta, on Treaty 6 territory, a traditional meeting ground, gathering place, and traveling route for the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Stoney Nakoda. I would like to acknowledge all the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. I believe a treaty is an inheritance, a responsibility, and a relationship, and I hope that recognizing our status as treaty people is one small action of many that will help us to be good neighbors to one another, good stewards of the land, and good ancestors to our children. I welcome you to share in the chat more about the lands you are joining us from. We are excited for you to be joining us again. As you know, AMAASE is now hosted monthly on the second Wednesday of the month from 3:30 to 5. The sessions flow as they always have, with our audience and attendees being the driver of the discussion. This is your time and your questions that we are all here for. So I invite you to start getting your questions ready so we can make the most of our time together while we introduce our panel guests. Today we have joining us Dan Overall from Trico Foundation, and Brittany Kurlock from the Trico Foundation, and Jane Bisbee from the Social Enterprise Fund. Thank you very much to our panelists for joining us. So I will now invite our audience members to come forward with their questions. Oh, I see we've got a question. Lori, do you want to get us started today?
Hi, thanks. I have a question as I'm learning about social enterprise. What I'm finding is most of the most successful initiatives seem to involve some kind of training component. I'm thinking of there's one that's like a thrift store and they train, and there's others that build and train construction workers. I haven't seen, and I guess I'm also interested if anyone else has examples that aren't training. That's my question.
Good question. We have had lots of clients that we finance that do not do training. It's not part of their business model. Yes, some people have found that to be something that works with the work they're doing because it might be able to drive another line of revenue. Right? That would probably be a reason why, for example, a construction company, it might need to support the kind of people that it wants to employ, and so some training might be necessary. But also, it might be something that they can see a revenue stream that supports the company coming, for example, out of the provincial government as jobs creation. So it's more than one revenue stream coming in. They're getting money to actually do the construction they're doing, but also another revenue stream, which can help make the model work. So I think that's why some organizations do it, and some do it simply because that's what they're interested in doing, is providing that training. I will say, however, it can be successful or it can be tricky. One of the loans we lost, and we haven't lost very many, but one of the loans we lost was a training program. And what had happened with that company was a lot of the companies that said they would hire their trainees then didn't. Said it was a great idea and even sat on the advisory council to the organization that was running the business, but then they didn't really come through with their hiring. So I've seen it work, I've seen it not work, but I don't think it's an absolute requirement, and that we have, as I say, many clients where training is not part of what they're doing.
Yeah, I just want to add to you, I think it ultimately comes down to mission alignment for a lot of these organizations. So what is their mission? So maybe an organization was working with individuals who have employment barriers, and they were offering maybe some upgrading classes and stuff like that. And then they looked at as employment as another way in which to work with these individuals, and sort of like a step up or a different way to support those who need. I will say there's often like trends. So you'll kind of see people going through like, oh, we're all doing training programs right now. And then sometimes it'll be things like, oh, we're going to train corporate Calgary now. So rather than employing people, we're going to take our skills and we're going to train. Things like that, you kind of do see some trends in the social enterprise landscape. And so it could just be that like a lot of those organizations are now kind of in the limelight from that period. When I talked about like mission alignment, and exactly what Jane said is, as you talk about employment or training based social enterprises, one thing to be aware of is that you might have costs associated with that mission. So the fact that maybe you employ people with barriers to employment might add some social costs that your competitors don't have to bear. So that's always something to think about as like if training was something to do, but there are lots of examples of non-training kind of based social enterprises. So even if you think about like there's some around food security, there's different ones around like housing, there's just a lot of examples. I think it's just maybe the training ones are kind of at the forefront right now. So I would say that yeah, so that would be sort of mine. I can send you, like, if you send me an email, I can send you like a list of a bunch of like other ones that you can think through, because there are some pretty exciting ones out there that don't specifically focus on training, and maybe they have a training piece, but it might not be sort of like their main focus.
And remember, professional development is important in any company, no matter who they are. Training and professional development of your employees is important. So if it's not a social enterprise that's training people that they then figure are going to graduate and leave their business, that their business is training, there is a really important role for doing that on an ongoing basis inside of any organization. So.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think the challenge for me has been, as I'm looking for examples, the most successful ones seem to be these ones, and I'm like, what is it about these? Because that's not my interest, where I'm starting to think social enterprise actually isn't the answer.
You don't have to do training of anybody to be a social entrepreneur. So don't, and I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair to say that the most successful people using social entrepreneurial approach on something are only offering training. They may have, it just may be the kinds of things that you're reading and looking at. There's a client section on our website that talks about all the different things that the people we financed have done. And so like Brittany's list, take a look at that, and you may find that there's other models as well. So don't be discouraged. You don't have to do training to be a social entrepreneur.
And I will note, like in some cases, like training might be a piece of what they're doing. So one of the things we talk about in our tools is that there's different ways to have impact. So maybe training is a piece of that. We've been talking a lot about this dentistry organization in India lately, and they have a training aspect, but I wouldn't say it's kind of the focus of their entire model. But for some people, that might be what they focused on. And sometimes it's really, I think training and employment's pretty reachable for audiences. So it might be one that gets more attention than maybe some other aspects like offsetting costs and sliding scales and subsidizing is sometimes employment and training might just be kind of where people are interested. So you hear more examples about it.
I think for sure, there's no doubt, sorry, Christine, that the training does tend to dominate a lot of the coverage. But I agree with my panel. There's tons of examples of very successful. In fact, there's so many. If Lori if you could get a bit more specific as to the type of social enterprise you're thinking of investigating, we might be able to either provide you some examples now, or that would enhance the specificity of the list that actually Brittany gives you. So are you looking more like developing a product as your social enterprise?
No, I'm a consultant, and I'm interested in doing work around policy and think tank work. And I'm just finding it's maybe not a good fit.
I would say take a look at Trico's work behind reimagining social entrepreneurship, and I think you'll find some things that help you think about being a consultant within the framework of being a social entrepreneur.
And I could also say we've actually been getting a lot of applications for awards and things like that of actually consultants who are trying to make a difference. I don't know if a lot of them have actually focused on, when you say policy, do you mean like interaction with government?
Yeah, because my background is in Indigenous work with the Indigenous community. So if you're talking about Indigenous community, it inevitably involves government. So yeah, influencing policy on the ways that they're dealing with Indigenous people. But
yeah, so we haven't received, I don't think, Brittany, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of applications of consultants focusing on policy, but I do know a lot are emerging in relation to Indigenous. So they may be some fantastic examples for you to look at. And it's like still a fairly new area. So I don't know that a lot have kind of developed to have that incredible scale, but a lot of, I think another key aspect of this issue is how you actually define success. Like, do you define success by like an international brand or like a certain amount of dollars, or do you define success as actually having impact where government actually starts listening to what you're trying to say? So if you're defining success that way, I think if you dig a bit more, you'll actually will find some Indigenous consultants who are starting to make a difference. Whether it's in the, I find the two, I'm not in any way an expert on this, but I find the two emerging areas for this are Australia and Canada. So you may also find some really intriguing examples of this field in Australia.
okay, thanks.
Thanks, Lori. And I saw Shannon put a note in the chat as well that she knows a lot of service-based ones. Shannon, welcome you to maybe provide some examples in the chat if you're open to it, if you have any specifics. All right, and we will move Eli. I see you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for putting this on. It's always great to do these AMAs and be able to ask questions. I just have an early question, and it might evolve to some other ones later. But first, for those of us who are looking at social entrepreneurship with products and sort of development and research costs and things like that, when do you find is typically the best time to approach individuals like you at the Trico Foundation or the Social Enterprise Fund? At what level usually are you looking for individuals to come to you at?
So I think probably the pieces, are you thinking specifically for funding, or are you thinking training?
So for funding and for just like if we have an MVP product, that's like for sure, but we might be pre-seed, like the company is just starting, or some ideas that might even be before the MVP, like is there funding for development of MVP, those sorts of things. Just trying to find when the best time, or in your guys' viewpoint, is sort of the best time to get engaged with you, even if it's just like advice. That's always something that I appreciate at any point.
Yeah, and I'll just put the caveat in that Trico's funding is only available to organizations with charitable status currently. And it's because we're a charitable organization. And so we have funding for organizations to do like experiments and try things out. And so for us, those types of organizations would be post-ideation. So they have an idea of what they want to do. and what they think their next step is on that journey is usually when we start working with organizations around funding. And then training as well. We have some like really early stage like base stuff, but most of our training, as you dig like a bit deeper into it, is post ideation. So you have an idea and sort of a social enterprise that you can run through that. But there are some like general tools that are available. Jane might be able to sort of give you a better idea coming from like the loan side of things and the non-charitable side of things around sort of the best time to engage with funders.
Thanks, Brittany. I'm gonna use an infuriating answer here, which is yes. So here's your challenge, and I know how hard it is to sit in your chair, is that financing partners, be they giving grants or loans, make up rules for themselves, usually to help maintain their sanity so that they're not looking at everything, right? And so this is where the research that you need to do about who is appropriate to play with you at any particular place in the process is really important. And Christine, we'll have to talk about AMAASE at some point too, and how we're hoping it will help you as a social entrepreneur thread that needle, because you could spend a lot of time researching, okay, government grants or what do different investors want. But that's a really key, that's the first key question is, and here's what I used to say was rule number one when I used to give grantsmanship workshops. Rule number one is they need you as much as you need them, which is that the funding or financing partner is only there because they need you to come for their funding or financing, right? That's why they exist. The challenge is for you then to understand the context that they're doing that within, and what is it that they are interested in changing. So some, there'll be funds that, as you say, deal with just certain places on the spectrum of a business. USEED, for example, and Jordana isn't here today, but she would probably focus way more on early stage stuff than some other funds would. We tend to be, at Social Enterprise Fund, we tend to be delightfully vague about what stage we would look at, simply because I don't want those restrictive rules in place. I want to be able to look at anything at any point to be able to understand. Now, we can do loans or equity investing, but because we tend to favor loans, and in large part that developed because nobody else was doing it, right? No one else would actually provide simple banking facilities to social entrepreneurs. We tend to look for loans. So in my case, if you've got no revenue, I'm going to be a little nervous about lending you money. But sometimes that may even work as well. We've gone in at an absolute dead flat stop, where they're right at the beginning, but there was some way we could see if they could do X, then Y revenue stream would be captured, and that would be able to start to support the work that they were doing with our investments. So that's why the answer yes. But it's a matter of figuring out what the interest is. And it's right. Financing is like, and grantsmanship is like a relationship, right? You need to know what they want to do and why they're in this. And that gives you all kinds of keys to what's going to turn their crank and make them say yes. So that's the homework that you have to do, and that's the infuriating part of it. So there is someone who would be interested at probably every level. It's just finding the relationship. Now, in Canada, the hardest relationship is when you start to get to a larger scale, because there is not as much of an appetite for some of the larger scale investments. We've had to invest in things that the traditional banking system and finance system should be investing in, but they won't for some stupid reason. Like the companies run by women. They're run by BIPOC people. They're doing something that's not quite traditional for us to do in Canada. There's these sort of preconceptions about what's normal, and so they get some very funny reactions. We're all hoping to work and change that attitude, but it's pretty challenging. And I think these days almost more challenging once they break through into the marketplace and then actually have to scale to meet the demand that they've now created. That's the part that I'm finding fascinating right now, is how hard that is. Like the $3 or $4 million scale up that they have to do to meet the purchase orders for $20 million that they're hanging on to. That seems to me totally goofy. But the financial system is an evolving thing, so I don't know. Does that help? Or
Yeah, that's great. I've heard sometimes like a similar answer. I like yes as the all-encompassing one, but answers of you go to them when you're ready to go to them, like that sort of tautology of go to someone when you're ready to go to them. And it's a little bit hard sometimes, depending, especially on the early side and pre-seed, kind of thinking about, okay, well, how much of a thing do we have to have built before going and saying, okay, we're ready for seed or these other bits.
the right answer probably for you is it a credible thing? I don't tend to look at like, where are you? It's what's coming in the door and what do you need to do to me, have you captured your market and your revenue stream?
Great.
And if this is just the step that you need to do that, that would be, to me, a far more important answer. And then the other really important answer is, can you manage it? Right? Do you have the people in the room who can then deliver on the potential that? And so, yeah. I think some of that comes from, if we protect ourselves with rules as a financing or granting agency, and governments, and I worked for government for 20 years, so I can be rude about them. They tend to do that to manage the flow in a way and to protect themselves against what might come in the door. Okay, if we'll only look at that, then maybe that means we won't have 5,000 things to look at. We'll only have 500. So it's not a great answer. It's just, I think, reality.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks.
I'll add, and once an AMAASE plug for NAMATA, as Jane mentioned, and I'll just reiterate, Eli, that so NAMATA is our online resource navigation tool. If it's just launched early October, so it's only got a few resources in there, but is growing by several by the week. And I can reiterate that it's one of the problems we're trying to solve with that, is that as we list the resources, really trying to highlight what stage is this resource for. The difficulty we have in trying to assess and document that in some level of consistency is hard enough. I can't imagine what that's like on the social entrepreneur side. Early stage means something very different across the board. Just that alone creates a problem. And so it's something that we're looking at addressing, in trying to find some sort of consistency in how we identify stage, and being able to highlight at a very quick way, like what stage this particular resource is for. To be honest, it's going to be a project in the making. And if you want to help, we will have some focus groups as we try to work our way through that. I think it's an concern that's recognized among the ecosystem, and that there's some collective work in trying to make that easier, to know when is a good time to approach different resources for different things.
Well, and I just want to add to kind of the power of people who've gone through it, or people who can act as friendly wise skeptics in terms of determining what type of money when makes sense for your organization. So the potential of talking maybe to some organizations who've gone through maybe some of the raises that you're looking at, or looking for the type of money that you've gone through, they might have some value, because I mean, the main thing is making sure that you're getting the right type of money at the right time, in order to keep your risk down and also be able to fulfill your goals. And so if you're in contact with any organizations that maybe are doing something similar, and have gone through that, there's huge value in that, and lots of people are happy to sit down for a coffee.
Sounds great. Thanks all for your responses.
I'll do one more build on if that's okay, Eli. Key thing that I think Jane mentioned is see this not as a transaction, but as a relationship. So even though you may not necessarily be at the stage that a certain funder or trainer provides, get to know them after you look at their website and kind of confirm fit and say, you know, here's my journey. And if I go down this stage that eventually, what would you actually need to see from me to get funding so that you can know you're actually building to it, even though the fit may not be right away.
And I guess to follow up on that little point, I don't mean to take up too much time, but to follow up on that comment, is the best way, so things like this are really good to put faces and names to things, but do you guys get a lot of like cold emails that you then respond to on that? Just trying to think about how to actually initiate that relationship conversation, because sometimes you reach out to a group and it's dead silent for quite a while. And so just curious from your perspective there, how that relationship typically starts. If it is just me saying, hey, this is the group that I represent, this is what we're doing, we're working with kids who are have complex needs, and just sending out an email, or how you think about that?
I get cold calls all the time and cold emails all the time. So let me give you, in my case, a hint. I am a human being. I am really impressed if somebody has actually taken the time to find out something about what I've done and who we financed, right? And so if you've looked at the list of clients or the kinds of investments that the organization has made and are able to talk about them, like what we're doing is not unlike, or I'm very interested in the work you did with, or whatever, that can help right away. They feel better, right? Because we're human beings. So put that bit of time in and find out whoever you're asking. If there's probably a simple way to find out whether they're even in the ballpark, but you know, if you think, well, maybe, then it's worth doing. But do that bit of research. Don't just fling out things. If I can tell that no one's read, you know, the first 4 or 5 sentences on our website, then if they haven't done that much homework, why should I be interested in them? And that's probably shallow and inappropriate, but I think it's true. And you're going to build a relationship going forward. If you don't like how we work and who we've worked with, why would you want to get in a long-term relationship with me? Yeah, because I'm going to be your new best friend, right? And so I think that's a key thing that people haven't often thought about. Some discussions go on for a long time. I've had people come to me, make a proposal, and I've had to do the really sad thing of tell them this isn't going to work for us. We cannot put money in at this point. Depending on how open they are to it, I'll often walk them through a really detailed way why or why not. The longest period of time I've had between that kind of conversation when we finally did finance something was 2.5 years. And he, to his credit, went out and did the homework and made the steps that I had pointed out to him that were a challenge. And he came back and we financed them. So.
Yeah, I'd actually second to the 10th degree what Jane. Brittany is so much more gracious on this side of stuff than me, but like we've developed a website to kind of explain what we do. So to get these cold calls of, hey, could you kind of tell us what Trico does? It's just actually quite, I find it personally quite infuriating. So if you do that homework, and plus, I mean, it saves your time as well, right? You can go through it at your leisure, figure out. And to Jane's point, we don't do much social finance ourselves, but we read a lot of research on it. And it does seem like the trend is that it takes a while to develop that relationship. And almost everything we talk about is going to have like this catch-22. The catch-22 here is you have to have the patience to let that relationship develop, but you also have to keep an eye on that you're not just being strung along and that you're not actually just boxing yourself in a corner because you've been talking for a year plus on one funder and that's not going anywhere. Now you need the money and you don't have any other kind of fish on the line, so to speak. So be very careful that while you're being patient with these relationships, you're not boxing yourself into a corner where you need that one relationship to work, or you're screwed if it doesn't.
And I would just build on that. I get lots of kind of cold emails, and generally our process as a team is to write back and say, hey, we don't want to waste your time. We don't want to waste our time. We've tried to lay out everything as specific as possible on the website. And so tell us what you're interested on the website. Tell us which program makes sense and that you want to talk about further. And because, for example, like our funding is only available to charitable organizations in Alberta, if somebody comes to us and says, hey, we want to do this, and we're interested in assess, there's not a fit. So we'll try to get back to them as soon as possible and make it really clear of why there's not a fit. But it helps us in terms of just really like trying to get as clear as possible on what we can and what we can't do. And so we often direct organizations back to the website, and a lot of the times we don't hear back from those people that we direct back to the website, right? And it's because they go and they look at the program and they go, I don't fit, right? And so we've really tried to do our best, and I know Jane has as well, to make things as clear and as user-friendly as possible, because we're not only do we know that you're stretched for time, but we're also small teams, right? So yeah, that's what I would say is check it out and see if there's any like synergies and connections, and then reach out when you see those.
Great. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. And we do have a couple questions in the queue. So Dan, I see you have your hand up.
Again, hello, everybody. Thank you very much. It's super useful to be able to ask questions and meet people like this. I sort of feel like you've been speaking to me, Jane, because we started the conversation together about 2 years ago, talking about the Alberta Health Innovation Grants and building accelerators, both for Alberta and in Calgary. The Calgary is an impact laboratory. We accelerate and finance impact ventures. We've been working in food systems and in health. So I have one general question and a specific question. The specific question is, Jane, I know that you've funded collaboratives. Many of our organizations are cooperatives, and we have a terrible time getting them financed. I wonder if you can just talk about best practices and how you structure cooperatives to make them financeable either through debt or equity.
The challenge in the cooperatives, specific cooperative structures that have come to us where we've had problems and not been able to move forward, we're really around the data, no one able to really give me a good, strong answer about day-to-day management. Because you have to manage a business operation in real time. And cooperatives, while they might be wonderful in being able to work out problems and give everybody a chance to actually express their position on a thing, you might not have time in real time to do that. And so I think some of it comes down to, is there a good, strong management system, whatever that might mean or look like, that actually in real time will allow the enterprise to work as a business and be able to make those pivots and those decisions in a practical way. That's when I think back about cooperatives that we weren't able. Now we have done some collaboratives or joint ventures of some sort, but the ones that really floundered were the ones who couldn't answer simple questions for me, like, for example, we're going to staff this business with our members. How do you then handle the situation where you find out that one of your members is not productive towards good customer service, and you may have to contemplate firing them and yet they're a member of your cooperative. If you've worked through that and figured that out, then okay. But if you haven't thought about that and you just say, oh, no, we're going to get along. Yeah, well, okay. Great. Not with my money. Because I think we've had, I mean, I've learned from our mistakes. I've learned where we had organizations that did not have a management structure that actually delivers, that actually is real, can work on the street and on, on a day-to-day basis. To me, the three most important things we look at are the mission, the money, do the numbers work, does that really make sense? But the third one's the management, and are the right people in the room, do they know who they don't have in the room? That's just as valuable to me. We've got this part of it. What we're hiring for, what we're adding to this is this piece of the management that we need that we don't have. So cooperatives, I've found that's been a bit of a challenge. I don't know, Brittany, Dan, have you had any experience with those?
No, it's one of the ones that we don't see very often in just sort of where we work and who we fund. Are you in contact with the Alberta Community Cooperative Association at all? Because they'd be probably the best resource in Alberta here of kind of figuring out like how do you move these co-op projects forward, both as a funding thing, but then also as a structural what needs to be done. So they're probably the best resource. I'll pop their website into the link or into the chat box.
Perhaps just then briefly, the second question for us is we're building food hubs for low-income, food insecure people. And it's really about building platforms for supply chains for both regenerative farmers building sustainable products and linking them into distribution mechanisms so that people who are producing food can get it to people who need food. We've also just been funded through the Common Approach, which is a federal agency to build a network for optimizing food impact. I wonder if you can just chat a little bit about what is happening from your perspective in food systems, regenerative food systems, and in mechanisms to improve food security.
That's such a huge topic and an extremely tricky one in anything that I've seen. I'd be happy to have a conversation with you, but it's something that I'm not an expert on, other than there's another area that makes my stomach hurt when I start to look at some of those. I mean, another national organization that bringing together food security and food hubs across the country. Great, because I've seen others before. And somehow we haven't cracked this thing in the country. We've financed a couple of things that I hope will make better connections. Why I'm always interested is connections between local producers and local outlets, either retail or distribution, that can get food out in a logical way, and also at prices that actually are bearable. And we've also supported some direct food security projects. But wow, it's a tough one. It's a very tough one.
Why wouldn't we choose anything but the tough ones?
Yeah, I would just add, I think that we're seeing a lot more organizations focused on that recently, especially like the connection between local food and those who may be food insecure. So we're seeing a lot more action in that, but they're all relatively new and new stage. And I would also say that a lot of them involve different layers to that. So like legislation wise, what is allowable for these organizations, what can be done with commercial businesses and how does that work? Because we all know that food insecurity or even just food waste, for example, are complex issues. And so generally they involve quite a few people in there. Jane, you
And-
were going to add something.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, and often it's the one we think we should be able to fix that. We'll get involved with that, and have not done their homework in the food industry as it exists. Because if you don't know and understand what's wrong, how are you going to fix it? And so quite often there's some wonderful energy and enthusiasm with a healthy dose of naivete attached to it. So it's one where there's going to need to be some really smart and serious people helping to figure out how we fix that. So maybe you've got the solution. That would be great.
Brittany, do you recall the wonderful food security report that recently came out of MRU and the foundation that's specifically working on that issue?
This is aimed around Calgary, the Calgary piece, or
Yeah,
is this?
it was the YYC Food Security Fund worked on it with MRU. I can probably find it and pop the link into the message box, but there was a really interesting study looking at food security and maybe looking at some of those gaps that exist.
Yeah, Dan, if you haven't heard of that one, I think you'd be really interested in it. So let us know if you haven't heard about it, and we'll make sure we'll get you the link either here or just email it to you if we can't find it quickly.
Please do. And if anybody in your circle is interested in joining the network for improving measurement, that's us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your question, Dan, and to our panelists for lovely. The conversation's been very rich tonight. It's very enjoyable. Tenzin, thank you. It's nice to see you, and thank you so much for your patience. Please share your question.
Oh, thank you, Christy, for inviting me here. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hi. Okay. Hello, Treco, and everyone participating here. Thank you. And I'm one individual who wanted to contribute to the Calgary community. And I have this opportunity to run a barber shop here in Calgary. I just started, but I see an opportunity where main goal is to contribute. And I checked Trigo's website. It has it's very exciting to see something that's like gonna help me, or like that's the vibe I get from checking the website. But I don't know if how much or how I'm willing to collaborate, and my mindset is mainly contributing to the community from the profits from the shop. And I'm willing to sacrifice my time, and I just need information and some structure and some game plans and networking to give me some brains to help me grow this seed of mine that I'm intended to grow. That's my intention, and that's why I'm here to reach out for help. It takes a village to raise a child, kind of thing, because it's hard for an individual to everybody wants to contribute, and that's no brainer, but together we can contribute better. It's frustrating to do it as an individual, and we can all feel that. And I'll stop right there, and I'm willing to connect and ask more. Looking for a helping hand. Yeah. Question. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I would just add, I mean, there's lots of different ways that organizations or individuals can have impact. And so if you're interested in kind of learning about different organizations and how they've done that, I'm just going to add in the chat box a link to, we have a nice 30-minute video that kind of summarizes some of the possibilities in this space. So our hope with it is that it really does inspire organizations and individuals to start thinking about what type of impact they could have. And then also on top of that, maybe some of the pressure points or things to think about as you look at that type of impact. So being aware of how you're bringing together both the business side and then also the sort of the give back or the social side of your organization. So I'm just going to throw that in the chat box. It might be a good resource if you're just starting to like explore this area and start thinking about, you know, how does my organization, it's important to me that we do have a community piece. So what does that look like for us? And hopefully I'll give you some sort of ideas. And then there's always like deeper materials to run into as you go into that.
Yeah, I was thinking, Tenzin, as you were talking, that the materials and the kind of thinking that Trico could help you to do would probably get you started on where you need to go. And then you might want to also take a look at NMATA around some of the capacity building that's in there too. But I would start by taking a close look at some and just walking through, putting your idea through something like the blender. Don't you think, Brittany, something like that would help give you a bit of a path to work with?
Yeah, and the link that I sent you for the Rethinking Social Entrepreneurship, we've taken like a 2-hour plus kind of like training that we do, and we put it down to 28 minutes. And it actually runs through 2 tools that are really meant to inspire possibilities. So the first one is the 4 ways business models can have social impact. It really looks at different ways in which social entrepreneurs and businesses can address their why. So there's that tool. And then as a sort of leg up, and the next step to that is then looking at those possibilities you discussed and then thinking about, okay, well, what does that look like in my actual business and how does that impact how I operate?
Mhm.
There's going to be, sorry, Tenzin, there's going to be like 2 fundamental issues and they can interrelate and overlap. But one is you're thinking about being a social impact organization and what that looks like and what's involved. That for sure Trico can help you with, and those tools are a nice start. But there's also the kind of broader issue of just like running a barber shop and the business kind of side of it, which Trico may not help. And I didn't get quite a sense from you as to whether you wanted input on that or not. If you want more kind of like the help with the basics of business as well as the adding the impact stuff, I'll put in the chat business link, which I think provincially is probably the best organization for helping you kind of develop a business. And Jane's got a thumbs up, but if any of the other panel think of other resources just on the fundamentals of developing a business, feel free to provide those. Yeah, actually, Brittany's great. Momentum actually as well. Tenzin may help you in terms of actually developing the kind of like business side of it, as well as obviously they do some social impact stuff.
Could I just to like could I make an appointment to Trico to meet face to face for the social enterprise part, and the business part I can talk to Business Link or whoever, but it's not like separate thing. I feel like it's one thing that I need to work on, but in a separate organization. My main goal is to like obviously to generate income revenue to support the social enterprise. That's the main goal of it, right? And so yeah, I get it. And can I make like appointments or that's immense helpful to make an appointment and meeting face to face on things like that.
So
For me, it works better.
Yeah. Yeah, I would recommend, honestly, the first step is probably to familiarize yourself a bit with a few of our thinking and our materials. And the reason is that we kind of need like sort of like a base understanding of what we'll discuss. And the other piece is, so I would like recommend checking out the video link that I sent you, because I think it potentially will kind of lay out some of that basic stuff. And then reaching out. So I can put in our email address and you're welcome to reach out from there. But any organization that would kind of come with a cold open, I'd probably want to talk about them sort of in that place first. And it's just to lay the groundwork and understand a bit about sort of how you're understanding this and how you're working on it.
That's fair. And where can I get the information to in the chat box or on my email?
I think most of it's been put in the chat for you, Tenzin.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm not sure if you joined the LinkedIn group of social entrepreneurs, but that might be an area too. We have just over 100 members now. And you can just post there and see if someone has done something similar and would be willing to go for coffee or have that kind of in-person conversation that I think you're really craving. Ritwick will post the link in again when he gets back to it, because I know he's always got it handy. So that might be another resource to connect with, like a social entrepreneur peer through that group. So okay, thank you, Tenzin. I hope that was helpful, and thank you again to our panelists. So this might be the easiest AMAASE session I've ever facilitated, or of anything, because you guys have just done all the work yourself today.
I want to say something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before closing. So if you're curious about the barbershop, it's called True Jen's Barbershop. And if you have kids to come or family members to come in and cut, and while giving me advice, why not? It's a community thing. And yeah, just thrown out there.
And it's in Calgary?
It's in Calgary. It's called
Great.
True Jen's Barbershop.
Fabulous.
Yes, barbershop. Thank you.
I had the joy of talking with Tenzin at a curious conversation, and was really intrigued at the connection between the barbershop and the community building and the conversations, and just kind of felt like we were almost going back 100 years into how things used to be done. But
Dr. Joel has put his hand up. Yeah.
I just want to thank you guys for doing this. We're getting a lot of requests on the Premier's Council on Charities and Civil Society about ongoing ways to continue and stabilize funding. And social entrepreneurship has come up a number of times. So I really enjoyed listening to the conversation. And you do this regularly, did you say? Yeah. So
monthly.
Once a month.
Yeah, monthly on the second Wednesday of the month. Even through the summer, I noticed the very rigorous schedule has us going. So every month we will be here.
Well, thank you. I think it's a growing source of knowledge here that people are looking at. Also, that we're finding that there's a lot of private sector that are looking at how to increase their opportunities to help people out. You know, rather than just profit, what are their social contributions that they can make to their communities, particularly rural areas. So thank you for doing this.
That's one of the reasons why we do that work, is to try to bring both ends of the spectrum together in the middle, so that all business is more socially responsible and socially aware. And even not-for-profits with charitable status are more business-like and therefore successful. So it's an ongoing, I hope, change to the entire way we think about the economy.
Absolutely. So you don't fund private sector as well, do you? Oh, you do?
Oh, yes, we do. We find any corporate structure. I don't care what your corporate structure is, as long as it's the right one for what you're trying to do.
Oh, because I know a private company that's really got some innovative stuff, and they're kind of working on what to do next.
There you go.
Thank you very much for that feedback. So, and Tenzin, if you didn't see it, Amy put a link in the chat to an article around mental health through barbershop. So that might be something very useful to you. And I actually think I'm going to make sure I read it after this session as well, because as I said, I'm very intrigued by this. Okay, so with that, I am going to slowly start to transition us into our closing practice. If somebody does have a last minute question, I welcome you to pop it in the chat, and we can probably still get to it. So as Omar has put in the chat, you can sign up for our December 14th AMAASE. And I will, at this time, without any permission ahead of time, encourage all of our panelists to wear Christmas hats if they wish, because it will be our festive AMAASE. Throw a little cheer into it. It's been dreary. Hopefully it's not dreary in December. So again, thanking our panelists and our attendees. It's very, very important that we have both here to make this successful. I will provide an opportunity for any of the panel members or organizations or audience members to share anything in the chat for any events or updates they have coming up. So you guys can throw that in there. And then I will call on each panelist just to share verbally if they have anything they want to share and any closing thoughts they have. So Dan, we'll start with you today.
Nothing to share in terms of activities, and I'll leave that up to Brittany, but I just wanted to do a special thank you to the audience for the resources and links and discussions in the chat. It's absolutely fabulous. So it's just fantastic to just see this as kind of like not just a panel, but a community coming together on these conversations. So thank you so much for being here and participating through the chat.
Thanks, Dan. And Brittany.
Yeah, so I think we're all kind of winding down for the year at this point, but I would just, I hope we are, but by December 14th, we will be, right? But like I'm thinking event-wise, we don't have anything like huge coming up, but I would say our resources are online, they're free 24/7. That video that I shared out is the newbie on the block, but we're pretty excited about it if you're just interested in learning a little bit about how we talk about social entrepreneurship and some of the pieces around there. And then I think Christine can update on this. I know that ABC's got some sessions coming up because there is the investment readiness process deadline coming up, which may fit some of the needs of the organizations here. So I'll let Christine maybe talk about that, but that's one of the deadlines I've been hearing about lately.
I will plug that in a minute. Jane, do you have any closing thoughts or things you want to share?
I just wanted to echo Dan's thanks to the audience. This only works because people are willing to put questions on the table and have us noodle over them. And there's always people in the room who can add to the conversation, which I love. So that's great.
We do have our curious conversations, which are just general conversations around the ecosystem, and you can also find those on our website. And the dog has clearly decided we are done here today.
And now it's working up our dogs too, so it's
awesome.
perfect.
So glad, because this is not normally a problem.
It's not a problem, it's cheerful.
Yeah, he's trying hard not to bark. That's his I'm gonna whimper because I'm not allowed to bark sound. And with that, I'll maybe get Ritwik to just throw my email in the chat. If anyone has questions about ABC, you're welcome to reach out to myself or Ritwik. And with that, I hope we will see you and many more on December 14th. And thank you all for coming, and we look forward to seeing you soon. And thank you. Yeah, thanks everyone.